It's the second day of the Northern Future Forum in Helsinki. But British Prime Minister David Cameron is facing a tough time over his plans to limit immigration from the European Union. 3 leaders of Nordic countries spoke out against the attempted rule change on free movement. Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven said a change will ruin the 28-member group. He said, "The fact that one country believes that one thing is wrong does not mean that we can change, because every country might have its own priorities, and that may just ruin the European Union." Adding insult to injury, Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb said that the UK should be rewarded with an EU medal for opening the borders to Eastern Europe. Norway's Ms Solberg insisted that free movement is an ideologically important principle, and although not a member of the EU, Norway enjoys free movement of labour due to its participation in the single market. The Prime Ministers from the Nordic and Baltic countries are attending a meeting in Helsinki to discuss the future trends in Northern Europe. Hosted by Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb, the meeting aims to stimulate debate on means to support innovative business activities and improve competitiveness of education systems. The 4th such meeting will host 80 experts from Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania and Britain in informal discussions. So as Cameron sees himself to be amongst friends in the most informal of formal prime ministerial gatherings, he might find himself a bit hot under the collar in the freezing cold of Finland.
Well, Mr. Euan Grant, political analyst, is joining us via Skype from Pakistan to discuss this further. Mr. Euan Grant, Cameron hasn't really received that much support from his EU peers about limiting the free movement of migrants across the EU. Do you think his dreams are a bit too high at this point, trying to convince his peers to agree to this?
Quite frankly, the simple answer is yes, I do.
And so what do you think he's going to try and do now? What other tricks does he have up his sleeve to try and convince them?
Well, I very much hope the Prime Minister does have some tricks up his sleeve, and I believe he probably will have. You always go into any negotiations and meetings with a plan B and a plan C. I suspect he could, and hopefully he will, play for time by encouraging a dialogue on this and pointing out that, building on Mr. Stubb, the Finnish Prime Minister's comment that Britain was, along with Sweden, one of the few countries, together with Ireland, that allowed free movement in 2004 for all the new applicants, I think he should point out that we have taken many immigrants and that we are looking for reform, and that he can win time by saying that Britain is vulnerable to surges because of its policy on benefits. It does not require contributions to national insurance funds in order to get benefits. I think that would win him some time, and I would also suggest something which would hit home with both Sweden and Finland, as well as the Baltic states, that Britain is a loyal ally in NATO and is contributing heavily to the NATO presence on a rotating basis in the Baltic states. There are RAF Typhoons in the Baltic states on air defence patrols. That shouldn't be underestimated.
And Mr. Cameron has promised that he will deliver by December and limit the number of migrants coming in from the EU into the UK. Do you think he will succeed in this promise?
No, I don't. I think he's set it too high, and he probably was looking for some support from Sweden, given that Sweden has experienced strong surges in immigration from the new member states, and indeed from outside. And he's probably perhaps a bit surprised that he hasn't got it. I think he's perhaps gone too far there.
And one of the things that were brought up is that the UK could somehow limit the number of national insurance numbers they issue. Do you think that would be something that the UK could possibly do? And does that go against the agreement and the treaty agreed to with the EU?
Yes, I would say it does. I mean, it is in effect limiting your right to work because you're not paying the required taxes. National insurance is really a tax. That would be considered by the back door, and I don't think that's a realistic run.
So you don't think that he's going to be able to limit the migrants who are coming via the EU into the UK by December, even though that's a promise he did? So given that he might not be able to live up to the promise he's given the British public, how do you think that's going to affect his general election chances then?
Well, the point is that whether you regard Mr. Cameron as sound or not on immigration, he is putting a position that is closer to what many people feel in the opinion polls. There is the danger of UKIP, but of course, how many people regard UKIP as an alternative government? He will be pushing very much the point that I'm in line with the views of many people. I'm fighting for your interests, but if you vote UKIP, you may well get a government of a very different stripe.
Mr. Euan Grant, a political analyst joining us via Skype from Pakistan. Thank you very much for joining us.